You are listening to the Sales Journeyman Podcast, the podcast to help sales professionals and entrepreneurs achieve their goals and impact their industry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining the Sales Journeyman Podcast. Listen, if you've been in sales for more than 5 minutes, you've had this experience. You're sitting in front of your computer, you're looking at a large Excel sheet of leads, and you are dialing and dialing and dialing them. And the leads that you have are dog water. You're calling, and there's the phone numbers are gone. The people are completely uninterested. And it's just 100 calls a day of absolute nonsense. And when you go to your manager and you tell him, hey, I think these leads aren't great, what does he say? It's not the leads, it's you. And all that does is leave you feeling defeated, like you suck at sales. You go home, you hate your manager, and you just want to quit. Well, today we are talking to a marketing genius. The man's name is Tyler Mounce. He is the co-founder and CEO of AMPLIS. After a 13-year career in health and fitness, where in the last 3 years, he was the head of marketing for a fast-growing fitness and wellness service business, Tyler decided to start AMPLIS out of the desire to help small to mid-sized businesses scale profitably through lead generation. 2 years in now, and AMPLIS is an established leader in the go-to-market strategy and B2B outbound marketing. He also co-founded 100 Companies That Care, which is a group of business leaders that have granted nearly $1 million collectively to charities. Lives in Tucson, California with his wife and 3 kids. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful. Tyler, one thing I talk about a lot in my school course is I'm a big believer in the 4 phases of selling, right? Namely marketing, selling, closing, and customer service. So a lot of our conversation today will kind of be around the first phase, but I want to know what made you want to walk away from a steady career as a head of marketing for a fitness business to really go start your own business.
So I worked for the same company for nearly 13 years, and it was started as a small kind of boutique personal training gym. I was a personal trainer. As the company grew, there was opportunity to move into new roles. And so I sort of like worked up into the role of head of marketing, not because I had experience in it, but because I just had the opportunity and the ability to learn and kind of pick things up quickly. And I took over as head of marketing in 2019, like mid to late 2019. And so obviously fast forward, and then the pandemic happens, which is a weird time to be in marketing for a health and fitness business.
Yeah.
There was like a little bit of a gray area because the company was also a medical facility. It was kind of like this hybrid like fitness wellness model. So that company was really fortunate to be able to like still operate throughout a large portion of the pandemic in some capacity. And so what ended up happening was, it's a small bootstrapped company, like essentially a startup. And what is always a challenge with like small bootstrap companies is cash flow, right? Like there's not just a massive amount of cash. And a lot of times, marketing is an exercise in like learning to waste money less badly. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have to spend a lot of money to learn, and like there's a cost of learning in marketing. So what ended up happening is through most of the pandemic, this company kind of hobbled along at a break even. And then we got both rounds of PPP, we got a huge idle loan. And so for the first time in the company's history, we had cash. And so we started just to deploy that really aggressively in different channels. And then, over time, things started to click, and then the company grew. And in that period from, let's call it early 2020 to 2023, we grew from like a $3 million a year business to a $10 million business with like opening new locations and stuff, mostly just because we started to get a handle on what lead gen could look like in a way that was scalable and profitable and so on. So when I was thinking about my company and what I wanted to do, I was like, man, what would I have done if I didn't get bailed out by all this government money? Like, how would I have done that? Like not a lot of small businesses can build an in-house marketing team because the payroll is too high. My experience working on the brand side was, man, these people don't get service businesses, these marketing agencies. Like they're running they're doing ads and digital for like e-com brands, SaaS brands, things like that, like large companies that have like either the huge distribution or like the ability to sell, like a massive addressable market and stuff. Whereas like services is a different thing. And again, that could be B2B services or local services, home services. Like when the output of marketing is meant to result in a lead, not checking out for something online, there's a nuanced but important difference. So I'm like, what would it look like if I created a model where um, that would basically help companies like the one I was in scale if, but in normal times, not with all this cash infusion without needing the cash infusion. So that was kind of
Mhm.
the genesis of Amplis.
Awesome. And I think you kind of touched on something there too. Marketing really is a numbers game, and it really is a volume game and paying to lose. What were the changes that you made? It sounds like you kind of went from a volume sort of perspective to a more quality perspective of marketing because you don't have necessarily cash flow. And like you said, the companies you service being small to mid-size, they don't have it either. So what changes did you make? Was it a change in ads? Was it a change in strategy? What kind of changes did you make going from your company with a bunch of cash to Amplis, where maybe you don't have as much cash, but you have to be really effective?
Yeah. So the biggest thing in that business we saw a lot of traction using digital ads. Obviously, like lots has changed in the last 5 years, and so um, would there's things that I didn't know at the time, but I like learned and I kind of like I was like, oh, that's kind of how it works retroactively. Which was one was that company was a high end business with pretty good retention, and so what I didn't really understand was how you could look at like lifetime gross profit and work backwards to leverage that from from an acquisition standpoint. So like at the time we kind of knew like, hey, like if we get customers, like they usually pay us a lot of money and they stay a long time. So it makes sense that we can spend a lot to get some of them. So one of it is we just diversify, we just try different channels. And finally we found something that clicked. And at the time, and even now still, I think the Meta ad platform has some of the more reasonable ad costs
Mm,
in terms of like impression volume and stuff like that. Particularly if you're focusing in a local geography, right? Like you can serve 100,000 impressions for a few grand a month.
mm,
And a lot of times that can be a meaningful amount for service businesses where they have a high lifetime value on the client. So learning learning how to find channels where we could acquire a customer at a reasonable return on the lifetime value and understanding what those numbers meant. Those were some of the ways that we kind of like were able to scale it more predictably.
yeah, no, that makes sense. And so when it comes to really utilizing social media, that's kind of like the age we're in right now of everybody currently, I think post COVID and even now as people become older with the invention of reels, and it seems like most of the platforms are kind of becoming the same, right? Like Facebook now has reels, Instagram has reels, TikTok obviously is a completely reel based platform. LinkedIn even now has reels, you know.
Yeah.
What are some of the trends that you're kind of seeing in social media that are really challenging and maybe opportunities for marketers and businesses to really take advantage of that you guys have really seen?
Yeah, so I gotta be careful. Most of what we've done on social media is around paid ads. We do some organic content for our clients, but it's usually layered into a multi-channel strategy.
Yeah.
So what I can say is there's a couple things like on the creative side of things. What we're seeing is in the past you used to tell Meta or Google or whatever like I want this person with this criteria and like you would give your avatar and you'd be like and you would essentially pay the algorithm to find those people. Whereas now what we're seeing is the algorithm is a lot more sophisticated than it was even a few years ago. And so now what we see, particularly with like any sort of paid ads where is that you use the creative to filter for
Mm,
your target customer, not the actual audience. Like the algorithm knows everything anyways. And so the algorithm can pick up on what it is that you're talking about in your ad and it already knows who those people are. And so what we're seeing is you let the creative dictate who the algorithm goes to find for you. And a lot of times you see the best results when you let the algorithm do its thing versus trying to like box it in.
yeah.
So that's number one. It's funny, like this is all with the proliferation of AI. The what we see that's working now from a creative standpoint is probably going to be different in like 3 months. I still think real organic feeling content is good. Use it with your cell phone because um, basically AI stuff is happening everywhere. So there's still kind of a little bit of a window where low production quality stuff is performing well because it's even the AI generated stuff. It looks like it's an attempt to appear high production quality. Like if you ever watch the VO3 videos and stuff, it's like it
Yeah.
looks like it's shot with a red camera. So yeah, so those are some things we see as far as direct response stuff. But again, like we like taking a creative approach where like if you like the creative is what filters the most at the top of the funnel.
I think you're right too. I think AI is tempting, because anyone and their mom can now start a marketing agency and use AI and make ads. It's not hard to do necessarily, but I think that in this world of AI, I even, and it hasn't been around long, I even am longing for a more real experience with brands, right? Things that are creative, things that aren't just sort of lazily put together. Like when I see some of these VO ads, I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in the lack of creativity. I'm disappointed in the way it's set up. I know there's so much more that can be done with VO3, and just seeing what people do with it, it just disappoints me personally, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting, and my thoughts on this may change like next week. If there's some new thing comes out. But so one of the things that the Amplis does specifically, a very large portion of our business is, excuse me, programmatic outreach on LinkedIn. So we actually take someone's LinkedIn account and we run campaigns where we're doing direct outreach to target prospects.
Mm,
So it's very much like you could call it lead gen, you can call it outbound, you can call it whatever you want, but it's essentially a lot of it is like a sales enablement service
mhm.
where a lot of the work that goes into prospecting on LinkedIn, we automate for you. And so what's interesting is we use AI a lot, like every day for all the kinds of things that run a thing, but I think right at least in the current state, and I think this will likely stay the I think I'll believe this for a while, is that using AI for everything up to the touch point where you're engaging with someone is a good idea. You should use it. And then like right now, like you might, I don't know, again, like I said, this could change, but like we actually don't do any AI response handling for any of our campaigns.
Yeah, 100%.
And some people would be like, "Ooh, that's so inefficient." And I was like, this, and again, at least
It's not.
today, this may change, but as of today, that feels like our zigging when everyone's zagging because there's no AI SDRs yet that are doing what a good salesperson would do. And
Never do it.
especially on LinkedIn specifically, like LinkedIn's a really unique channel right now to do BD work in. And I think that like there's just a massive opportunity to have like one-to-one human-to-human conversations that lead to really fruitful business relationships.
I love that you said that. I love that because again, I just feel like everyone is trying to be as lazy as possible. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's like these AI platforms that people are trying to do with SDRs, like even just calling an insurance company to get a claim handled, and you get routed to the old school AI where they're like, well, click 3 for this option. It drives everyone insane. And I think you're totally spot on to zag when everyone's zigging, because if everyone's doing that, then there's no human element to the conversation. And at the end of the day, people want to talk to humans because like problems are more minute than just simple mathematical equations, which is all the AI can do currently. Maybe I believe we'll get better in the next 10 years, but as the market stands, I'm 100% with you on that. Don't ask. Also, we have to pay people. We can't have AI take away
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, well, so I mean, not to get too far down this rabbit, but I think there's going to be a radical shift in the way the workforce looks, and I think a lot of white collar work is going to get disrupted by AI changes with AI, and like there are elements of like there. It's funny, like there are elements where I think AI can massively improve the experience of what is done currently with a human. Like for example, like waiting on the hold. Like there are customer support experiences that I think would be massively better if AI was handling them, right? Like in
Right.
terms of, like waiting an hour to call Bank of America and then getting someone in a call center that's like connection's bad. You can like some of those things I think maybe like will get massively improved. But like one of the things nowadays again is like we see again, LinkedIn's probably the area where we see this most prevalently is like there's so many people that just come in and they're just like, okay, I'll use some marketing terminology. So there's what's your addressable market, which is anyone that you could sell to, and then there's your ideal client profile, which is the people that you really ought to be working with based on alignment of certain things like values and stuff like that, right? And people conflate the two. Like people be like, "What's your ICP?" They're like, "Oh, mid-sized companies, this many employee count, blah blah blah." I'm like, "No, that's your addressable market. That's the firmographic data that says, hey, anyone in this box is potentially a customer of ours." The problem is we have to filter. Like you can't. It's naive to assume that everyone in that bucket is your ideal customer.
Yeah.
And so our goal in marketing and sales enablement is to adequately filter for those people. So what happens is I get, and you probably get this all the time, right? Like LinkedIn messages comes in, connection request, and it's like, hey, we help companies like yours do X, Y, and Z thing. I'm like, how much do you know about my company? Well, I saw online that you blah blah blah. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like that's an AI snippet, right? Like, or
Yeah.
even just you generated something. My favorite is the one that where it's a video thumbnail and it has my website in the background. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So my point in all of that was, so I'm rambling a little bit. My point in all of that is that whatever we're doing, and again, this could be eventually AI doing this research, but like I always say, like, and I'm like a marketing guy, but I do sales as well and have done sales. Is like if you take a position of being curious and like trying to figure out what someone on the other end of a conversation is dealing with, at some point it's not sales, it's just helping people.
100%.
Right. And so, but everyone's just, they want to throw out their pitch. We have a rule in my company is like, and also with our clients is don't pitch slap, just because what happens is as soon as like, let's just say I'm like, I don't know you, we've never had a conversation. I'm like, hey, here's what we do. Would this help you? Like, would it work for you? And you're like, no. And you like, as soon as that no happens, like the conversation's over. Right. And so like all of the work that could go into me getting an understanding of your business and how potentially my service can help. None of that's happening. So LinkedIn in particular is great because even people that are decision makers in organizations are willing to have ongoing conversations as long as you keep asking open-ended questions and don't throw out the thing that says, then no thanks, I'm not interested. So again, I think one of the for salespeople in general, especially if you're in B2B, like LinkedIn's one of the best opportunities right now because it's like old school sales. You know, like you can actually have a question, you can qualify people, you can ask pain points, people will answer your questions. Oh, people will exchange 10 to 20 messages with you on LinkedIn. And what happens at the end of a conversation where you're genuinely curious and learning about the other person's business, when you say, here's what I do, like, would you be interested? They're either going to say yes or they're going to say no, but it's going to be a positive thing, right? Like
Yeah.
at that point, like you've talked, and it's funny, like all this stuff that like AI is like eradicating, it feels like is working really well. Like you asking about people's kids, like that's like, again, it's crazy, but like if you have a conversation with somebody and say like, hey, this is what I do, like I'll get people all the time, like at the end of a conversation where I'm like, this is what we do. And they're like, oh yeah, we're not a fit for that. But let me, let me think, I might know somebody. I'll have prospects that say they're not a fit, offer to refer business to me just
There you go.
because you have a conversation. So, anyways, that's a little bit of like kind of like again marketing leading into sales enablement. I think we really need to get to a position where we stop assuming there's a software vendor that we use and it is what it is. They're great. Like it's a good tool, but like their salespeople, it's like if someone doesn't move forward with them, they act like it's something wrong with that person. They're like, yeah, they're like, hey, nah, not everybody is a good fit. Like, let's just start with that assumption and let's organize marketing, sales enablement, sales around this idea of like, we're trying to figure out if they're the person that we can help the most.
Yeah. So much of what you just said there is golden. A couple of things I want to tag on, discovery. I always talk about the discovery. The sale is made in discovery. It's not made in closing. If you cannot sit down and have a conversation with someone and ask them and be interested and be curious about them and their business, you're not going to make it. Like no one's going to care. I sometimes I clicked on a ad the other day which it was like virtual assistants, and all I
Sure.
get from the people are text messages. And then the people that call me, I'm like, yeah, I'm interested. Just call me in an hour. Never call me back. But it's like you'll text me 20 times a day, and it goes back to that kind of what I said about late. And I want people to understand something too. And Tyler, I'm sure you being a marketer, you're in agreement with me. I'm all about volume. I'm all about call as many people as you can, send 1,000 emails a day if you can, as long as they don't ruin your domain. Like get the volume. But the volume is to get the opportunity. When you're in the opportunity to talk to someone, That's when you need to slow everything down and park and take the time to talk. Something else you hit on as well is I was training a sales rep the other day, and she was just shadowing me while I was cold calling, and she's like, "How do you get through to these people? Because every time someone cold calls me, I just hang up." And what I said to her was, "You have to humanize yourself. They have to understand that you're human too, and all of us have the capacity for some level of empathy, unless we're psychopaths, right? You have to humanize
Sure.
yourself." And I think that tags on well with what you said about AI. It's like people are trying to remove the humanity from the conversation. And I think the businesses that will be successful are the businesses that bring the humanity and keep the humanity in the conversation. That's why we have a job as sales reps.
Sure. Yeah, and again, I the other thing too is I think like people, I think there's a mindset thing, right? Like we go in like, how can I get this deal? And it's not, and I think that's the wrong mindset. I think the thing is like, how can I find out if the person on the other end is someone who needs my help?
Mm,
Like everyone, and it's funny because like you see, there's all these through lines. Like there's one of these things in marketing, like when you're doing messaging, there's like rules around like make it customer centric. Don't like I, we. It's like you, like you focus, you make it the messaging about them and what they're going to experience and the benefits they're going to receive and that kind of thing. And we don't, that has to carry through to sales enablement,
mm.
right? Like you again, I think the worst thing you can do going into a conversation, at least in this day and age where it seems like there's seven people who do everything, right? Like we're a marketing company. There's so many of us. But like what I try to lead with is like I want to understand, like, do they actually have a need that I can help with? Because one, we know that if we find people that are like those people are going to be our raving fans. And then also two, like if we go in like again, my company's not. We're just barely almost 2 years old, and we went through that process of like dealing with engagements that weren't quite the right fit for us because we didn't really know in the beginning and stuff. And it's one of those things where like you end up if you just chase deals for the sake of chasing deals and you don't actually know that you can help the person that you're working with, then what happens? You end up having churn rate, you have like higher cost of acquisition, you have issues on fulfillment. That's where like a lot of times people like where they talk about like marketing and sales and ops have like they fight it out with each other, right? Because they're bringing in a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I think like this idea of like leading from a place of curiosity and like leading from a place of empathy or thinking about the other person and doing it as genuinely as you can. Like obviously every salesperson wants to close deals and make money, and I'm no different in that regard. But there's sort of like this doing good is good business kind of idea behind it, whereas like if you focus on the other person and solving their problems and helping them, then it's like it's a lot. It's not really sales. It's just helping.
Well, it puts you in a position where you can close with conviction. When you
Yeah,
know you're and listen, we've all done it.
sure.
I've had to muscle deals in for the sake of money because we got to feed our families. But when you have a customer or a prospect in front of you that really does need what you're selling, the conversations can be more empathetic. You need this. I can go into any close when I know that I've properly done a discovery. We've got a good lead that really needs the product. And when they come to the objection phase, it's not a question. I don't feel bad being more forward with someone who I know needs the product that I'm selling. Whereas if someone it's 50-50, and then it's 50-50. Maybe I'll close them. And if it's like they're a 10% fit, but I really need this deal, that's when the kind of shady and aggressive and distasteful salesmanship kind of comes out.
Sure. Yeah.
And you get commission breath where people can just smell you're trying to get that commission. That's real. And I love what you said there. I think that's super important. I love what you said about, is this someone that I can help? And if I can add to that for any sales rep listening, that's where you might have to do an evaluation on the product that you're selling. Not every product is great. It's just not. And maybe if you are having to constantly like force people into a sale, maybe it's time to start getting that resume polished and find a company that has a product that's worth selling so you don't have to feel like scum every time you come home and take a shower. You know what I mean? I wanted to pivot into something because I want to talk about paid ads versus content. It's no secret. I'm a massive Gary Vee fan, and if Gary Vee, if for some reason you're listening to this, I'm going to get you on this pod one day. Um, I love what he says, but I think some of what he says, and I don't think it's his fault, is it in a 30-second clip isn't always the full picture. I believe everybody should make content. This podcast is content. My school games is content. Writing LinkedIn posts is content. I'm a big believer in that. But it takes time for your content to build to where it's actually having effect. It takes time to build a following. And that's where running paid ads can expand your timeline between your content taking off and you getting customers. Because reality is, like, if we don't get customers in our business, we don't have a business. If we don't close deals, we don't have a business. So what are some conversations you have around with maybe some of your clients about helping convince them that this is right, that this is something worth spending money on, this is something worth doing? How do those conversations work with small businesses that maybe have a restrictive budget?
Yeah. So that's a big question. I'll try to tackle it in chunks. So our core offering of my company is what we call marketing team as a service. And the idea is that you could hire a newly minted marketing grad for 65 grand a year, and they're going to run your socials and do your newsletter and make flyers and graphics and stuff for you, blah, 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 whatever, right? But it's unlikely to really move the needle. So what we did is we created a model where you fraction out essentially an entire marketing team, because small to mid-sized businesses, they don't need a lot of full-time people. They need a lot of part-time people if they're going to be a larger company. So that was the idea. This is, I didn't come up with this. So this comes from like the core. Alex Hormozy has like a core 4 activities to lead gen, which are warm outreach, cold outreach, organic content, and paid ads. So it's kind of based on a like one-to-one, one-to-many, like people who know you, people who don't know you, right? Like that's the matrix. And one of the things too is with the proliferation of AI and the ability to really automate almost everything, is there's not a lot of places anymore. Like there's not a lot of pockets where you can find outsized returns. Like now it's all about like you're kind of fighting for those 1 or 2% incremental improvements in multiple areas that lead to a profitable like acquisition strategy. So looking at those 4 things. So to me, again, if you can find a way to, with some level of control, again, it's hard because you can't build your own marketing team in-house, and outsourcing to an agency has its own challenges because they get a little bit disconnected from the ethos of the brand. Sometimes the CEO has to manage them, and then now the CEO is sort of functioning like a de facto CMO. Comes with all these problems. But why I like a multi-pronged approach, essentially kind of it comes around to this multifaceted approach because they all feed each other. So for example, when you're starting out in organic content, you're not going to have enough volume in terms of like, or you're not going to have a sample size big enough to tell you whether or not your creative is performing well, right? Like you're going to get like hundreds of views, not millions, not even thousands. And so what ends up happening is, and again, cold outbound is a little different. Cold outreach is a little bit different for like consumers businesses versus like B2B businesses and stuff. But imagine it's a B2B business and we're running a an omni-channel, all-bound approach or multi-channel approach. We're running paid ads, we're running cold outreach, we're running organic content, and then obviously warm outreach has to be done by the business itself. But so what happens is they all feed each other because ads is one of the only places where you can go and secure a sample size big enough to give feedback on your messaging. So you buy ads, and then which ads perform tell you which aspects of your business people are interested in, and that informs your organic content. And then as your organic content grows, the stuff that you do that gets the most engagement should inform your paid strategy. And then when you have your outbound or when you have your ads, if you have hooks that perform really well in paid media, those can become the subject lines and the hooks for your cold email campaigns. And when you have cold email messaging where you test 2 different offers and one offer gets a larger reply rate or interested reply rate than another one, you move that into offers that you run on your paid campaign. And so what happens is it creates this kind of like I call it virtuous cycle, where it's like it sort of like spins up and adds and it builds volume over time. And again, it's not any one thing. Like you're not going to run like, I'm just going to run a couple meta ads and hope my business blows up. Like that's not going to happen. And then there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with like retargeting, like, and then people have like inbound led outbound, and it's a fun time to be in marketing because there's so much cool stuff you can do. But that's to your point, to your question about like organic versus paid, it isn't an either or, it's a both and there's no one who builds a successful business, particularly if you have one that you want to exit from, where you don't have like a diversified acquisition strategy, right? And so I like it for both.
Beautiful. Love that. Love that. So I want to ask you this as well, kind of going in to some of the reasons why you've chose to start Amplis. Like if I was a small to mid-sized business, I mean, tell me why, with thousands seemingly of marketing agencies out there, why would we choose you as our personal virtual marketing team?
That's good. It's funny. It makes me think about am I telling the right story? Like in my own messaging? So one thing is we only do service businesses. So you're not going to have with us, you're not going to have this experience of like, hey, we do marketing for these e-com brands and we'll run your paid channels too. And we're going to run an e-com playbook on your service business, that kind of thing. You're not going to get that. The second thing is we do not white label other people's services and we don't offer services outside of our core, which is unfortunately a problem in marketing. Like you'll get a creative agency that does branding and stuff, and someone will be like, "Well, can you do our website?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'll do a website." And then they'll go contract it, and then they'll mark it up, so you're overpaying for it. And then the agency itself doesn't really have the expertise to QA the contractor's work. Again, we do only things that either directly or somewhat directly touch direct response lead generation. And we only do it for service businesses. So you're going to get something where, like, again, where our expertise is specific to a certain realm. And we're not going to pretend that we're good at everything. So, and the other thing too is for companies that are in a growth stage, the companies we work with, like SEO is valid place to invest in, but it's a long range investment. Like you pay now for benefit down the road. Usually, the companies that work with us are the ones that say, hey, I need to have a shorter return cycle on my marketing dollars because of the phase of growth we're in. So, those are a couple of reasons. Like if people who are in the phases of growth where all of the dollars they spend out on marketing need to bring a return in a shorter window, that's us. And then also, too, if you're a service business that doesn't want to deal with being sold a $40,000, branding package. Oh yeah, the logo, it's going to sell itself.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to transition more now into some questions kind of about Tyler the man. I mean, I know you're a busy guy. You know, you are a CEO of a growing marketing agency. You have a wife, you have 3 kids. How do you find like the balance for yourself between building this empire and trying to help these businesses grow and also being a husband, being a dad? Where do you kind of find that balance? You're laughing because I know this is a tough
I'm
question.
laughing. I know. Yeah, because it's funny. Like this is something I'm thinking about. Like almost, my youngest is 4 months old, and
Mm.
so this like transition to 3 kids, growing business, it's never felt more like whoa. Oh, so I read a book called Off Balance by Matthew Kelly when I was early in my career, and it's funny because this book felt so ahead of its time because I read this probably in I don't know, 2012 or something like that. And it was about work-life balance, which has been like, it's all you hear about now is work-life balance, right? And the hypothesis of the book is that balance isn't the thing to chase, fulfillment is. And if you are fulfilled in what you're doing professionally and personally, you can be happy no matter which way the balance swings. Because there's times when work needs more, and there's times when home needs more, and there's times when other, that kind of thing. So, one, I'm a man of faith. I that is one of the things that like keeps me grounded. So, again, I couldn't be a good dad. I couldn't be a good business leader, stuff like I wasn't grounded in that. So that's number one. And then number two is like, it's funny, like I've said this so many times in the past month is like, how do you do it? Like, I'm like, luckily I like both. I like being a dad. I enjoy my family and I like what I do for a living because that's the only way I would be okay with having absolutely no free time.
Yeah, I'm
so,
with you.
again, my thoughts on that, like people who are dealing with this sort of like work life balance issue, stuff like that, is like I just feel like, especially if you have a family and especially if you're a business owner, the idea that you're going to create enough pockets of time to like really offset how miserable you are is like there's no way. Like I would go back and I would focus on like, and I'm pretty ruthless about this in my own company. Like we all run the delegate and elevate thing from EOS, where it's like you write down, here's what I'm good at, here's what I love doing, here's what I hate doing, like that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty ruthless about delegating out stuff that's not like that's sucking the energy out of me. and I've got a great team. I'm fortunate in that regard. Like I have a team that can handle a lot of responsibility. So, yeah. So to me, like, what do you usually like? Build a life that you don't need to take a break from. And that's what it is. Like if you're like focus on like what's if I'm not fulfilled at home, like what could I change about that? If I'm not fulfilled at work, what could I change about that? Because you're going to get more of a return on investments in that conversation than you are in being like, well, how do I block off time so I can play pickleball once a week or whatever? Like that's cool and that's fun, but again, it's never going to be enough to offset a lack of fulfillment in like the main areas of your life.
Great answer. Great answer. And I'm right there with you because my youngest is 1 year old and I got three as
Oh
well.
yeah,
So, that's always a challenge having all the ambitions that you have. And if I can add to that, I think what you said was beautiful is I think patience is also key. You're
yeah,
not going to
for sure.
build an empire in a year or 2 years. Thinking about 10 years, like when I discipline my son, it's always like I'm not looking at him as a 5-year old. I'm looking at him as a 25-year-old and seeing, hey, where is this going to go? And I think you mentioned also like faith being super important. Like I'm also a man of faith. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus as well, exclusively. So kind of like how has your faith like really impacted you in your business as well? Like when it comes to ethics, when it comes to the things that you do? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's everything. But there's a guy who I know here in Orange County. His name's Ken Ryan. He's an incredible CEO leader, built an amazing business, and he had a really big impact on me. Um, because what I saw was someone who radically trusted, like radically trusted that if he followed the process, God would take care of the outcome. So I, you know, I'm like you. I do my best every day. Show up. I try to have patience, ask for patience, but understanding that. So I daily remind myself to not buy into the illusion of control,
Hmm.
like that I have some control over what's going to happen. Like even with like with kids, right? Like kids are a wild card. And for you too, I hope you can give yourself a little bit of grace. And I think that that's one of the things that like I'll tell you this: in building a business and having a family, I feel the trade off I make in my time on a daily basis. And like with the days that I spend more time at home, or I'm working, helping my wife with breakfast in the morning, and I get into the office late. Like I feel that. Like I'm like, man, I'm my business is not growing because of that choice. I feel like daily. And the same thing too is like when I leave the house early or I stay late for work or whatever, and I come home and I miss, a meal with my kids. Like I feel that like there's disconnect. And it's like I almost have to like and like I just have to constantly go to a place and receive grace and just know that like there are days when I have to give more energy to one place than another and trying to make those decisions faithfully. But again, like I was thinking about this podcast and praying about like what's this conversation going to lead to and stuff. And I'm glad I led here. But for me is like, and this guy Ken had a huge impact on me. Is like whatever we're doing, whether it's work or family or whatever, there are other souls on the other end of these conversations that we're having, and I do as my primary care for that person's soul more than my own revenue or my whatever other thing, or even like especially with kids, right? Your own comforts and convenience, like right? Like why can't you just let me get a good night's sleep, man? So yeah,
It's
so I mean,
true.
it's straight into your question. I'd like to say that my faith impacts everything I do in business. Is that always the case? Of course not. Like I said, I'm prone to the deceptive illusion of control, but I constantly try to remind myself that I'm not in control, and I try to. And again, like you said something earlier, I think it was about like thinking about like the outcomes or whatever, like building an empire and stuff. It's like the other thing too is like you got to enjoy the process.
Yeah,
It's like one of those
absolutely.
things where like you can't like it like and nothing will bring you down to earth like parenting is like you can't focus like okay cool I'm just gonna think about when this kid's 18 and they're out of the house like that's not gonna work, right? You got to enjoy the time being with them. And so I don't know, I try to enjoy the process. I love what I do. I love building my company. I love my team. I love my family. And frankly, that's really all I have time for these days. But luckily, I have fulfillment in both of those places. And I feel called to serve in both of those arenas.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Awesome, Tyler. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Guys, this has been an
Yeah, likewise.
amazing episode. I really hope that you guys take Tyler to it. If you are a small or mid-sized business, check out AMPLIS for sure. Really appreciate it. And Tyler, again, once again, thank you so much for your time. I really have enjoyed this conversation for sure.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Robert.
All right, have a great day, guys.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Also be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next time, keep selling.